It is Friday, so let's answer some questions from the listeners in this edition of Mailbag Friday.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned into another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. You also can catch us on wherever you get your podcasts. That could be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, we're on Odyssey, and we're on YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. If you're a first-time listener and you want to know a little bit more about me and this show, well, I'm based here in Kansas City. I work at Sports Radio 810 WHB, doing some hosting, a little bit of co-hosting and producing as well. But when it comes to this podcast, when you click on this link, you know that you're going to be getting 30 straight minutes of Royals baseball. Now, today's show is brought to you by SupplyHouse. SupplyHouse.com is the reliable way to get parts fast. Shop for your next plumbing, HVAC, and electrical job and get fast shipping from coast to coast at SupplyHouse.com. We got plenty of questions to get to in the mailbag, both from YouTube and both from Twitter. So that means that's the best way to reach me, really, is if you're going to be asking questions, whether they're direct messaging, you're leaving them on our YouTube videos, or you're just posting them below the tweet that I put out there every single Friday morning or Thursday night for that matter. That's the best way to reach me. That's the best way to see your question in today's episode of Mailbag Friday. So we'll kick things off with Andrew's question. I have a question for Friday's show. Why haven't we seen James McArthur sent down for Carlos Hernandez? Carlos looked good against the Reds, and why haven't we seen Chris Stratton DFA'd for Alec Marsh? Well, for James McArthur, I think that they have liked what he's done in some of the lower leverage spots. I know he wasn't great against the Angels on Tuesday night, but I thought there was a lot of soft contact there and a lot of bad luck. Carlos Hernandez looked good when he came back up to Kansas City, but let's not, fall in love with the small sample size of Carlos Hernandez, because overall he just hasn't been that good in his career, really. I mean, James McArthur has had stretches in his career that were far better than Carlos Hernandez. I know he was good in the first half, but it's a straight fastball. Even if it's 98, 99, 100, I don't think it's going to play at the big league level if he can't really develop that second and third pitch or get, more than just a high velocity fastball in his arsenal. Because that, to me, it can get a bit stale at the big league level if you don't have anything else to offer. And as for Chris Stratton getting DFA'd, Alec Marsh will probably be up either Monday to start one of the doubleheader games. And if it's not then, it will be in September for the call-up. So they won't need to DFA anybody, not on Monday and not in September, because that'll be the 27th man for the doubleheader. And then in September, that's when the rosters will be expanding. So to me, it doesn't really feel like there's a need to DFA Chris Stratton. I think that decision might happen when Hunter Harvey gets healthy, but that's up in the air at that point. So they're not going to demote James McArthur for Carlos Hernandez. I think Carlos Hernandez will only reappear in Kansas City this year if somebody does get banged up. Next question comes from, looks like Grant. This one comes from Grant. Sorry, a little bit of a loading problem there. In your personal opinion, do you think Salvi will be on another World Series team? If so, does that help his case into the Hall? I think the individual numbers will be what helps his case. And I would say that at the end of the day, having another 2 years like the one he's had this year might be able to get him the nod into the Hall, but I'm not sure just being on a World Series team will do it. Do I think he'll have that chance? It's going to be a long shot just because getting to the World Series is incredibly difficult. But if it's not for the Royals, I do hope he gets one more chance to play in a World Series. But also this year could be his opportunity if the Royals get hot in October. But first things first, they got to get there. But to me, I think the individual numbers will get Salvador Perez to the Hall of Fame more than just being on some good teams. This one comes from Luke. In your opinion, who do you think should be in the bullpen? I feel like Stratton and McArthur should be in AAA. Why are they still on the team? Yeah, kind of hand in hand with the James McArthur question that came from Andrew. I just think that they believe James McArthur is a good, valuable piece to have for some low leverage spots. He's still got a tremendous spin rate on a handful of his pitches. And now that he's out of the closer's role, he might be able to shine there. Chris Stratton, I do agree with you there. I don't understand Chris Stratton still being on the roster other than he's pitching in low leverage spots. I mean, at that point, you're just, interchanging whoever that guy is. I mean, he and Angel Serpa just aren't throwing in the tight situations in the game anymore. And really, at that point, you just need a reliever. You just need a body out there. But I do think something will change when September rolls around. Hunter Harvey hopefully gets healthy, and Alec Marsh joins this bullpen. But I do think James McArthur stays in this bullpen for the rest of the year. Wilson asks, how would you feel about Bobby in the leadoff spot? I feel like there's been too many times when we are one batter away from him in a key situation. I just think because he's playing at an MVP level in the 2-hole, I wouldn't screw anything up there with Bobby Witt Jr. I'm not saying he would struggle at the leadoff spot, but they kind of have a plan right now with Michael Massey leading off against righties and then Michael Garcia leading off against lefties. I see it being that way the rest of the year because I don't think somebody's going to just run away with the leadoff spot. I think that Matt Quatraro is going to be, a little bit more creative with it, but Bobby Witt Jr. to me is staying in the 2-hole there. I don't think they want to screw up Bobby in the 2-hole, Vinny in the 3-hole, and Salvador Perez cleaning up. Hayden asks, do you think Salvi will surpass George Brett in home runs, and does Bobby have the chance to reach that mountain and surpass both them at the end of his career? I do think Bobby surpasses both when it's all said and done, just because I think longevity, the overall great numbers, I think that he does surpass Brett and Salvador Perez for home runs in his career, just because I think it's just 30 home run potential every single year. And you factor in how many years he's going to be playing in Kansas City, I think he'll have a really good chance to do so. So Bobby does, I think, clear both of them. I'm going to say, let's see, how far away is Salvador Perez from George Brett? I'm trying to Google this on the fly here and stall for the career home run totals. Brett, I thought, was still quite a ways ahead. I mean, he's at 317, excuse me. And Salvador Perez is at, let's see here, great stalling here on this episode, 268. So if he can finish with maybe 10 more this year, 278, you know what? I'm going to say yes. I think Salvador Perez does surpass Brett in career home runs, but I do think Bobby Witt Jr. Goes over both of them when it's all said and done at the end of his career. Next one comes from Stormy. Hey, Jack, big fan of yours. Finally decided it's time I ask a question. Well, good for you asking a question for the first time, and I hope you keep asking them for every single Mailbag Friday we do this. But your question is, after almost 2 years under his belt as manager, how do you think Q has done? I personally think now that the Royals have playoff aspirations, he has been a little in over his head in moments. I do think that we have to take some of those decisions with a grain of salt, because I believe that a manager is really put in the spot or under the spotlight only a handful of times in the game. I mean, I think what Matt Quatraro has done really well is handling a below average bullpen. I mean, it's easy if you have Cleveland's bullpen. I'm not trying to knock Stephen Vogt, but if you got 4 or 5 guys that can get outs late, that's just easy to go to this guy or this guy or this guy. Matt Quatraro has to be a little bit more surgical with those decisions. But at the end of the day, from a fan's perspective, we don't like when that move doesn't work out, and then you blame the manager of, well, why did he go to this guy in that spot? Everybody's got their reasons. And I actually had somebody tell me in the Royals organization that one of the strongest attributes of Matt Quatraro was preparation and looking ahead to certain things and who he wants to go to in certain spots. And I believe that, when he makes some of those decisions that you go, I don't know why he would go to this guy in that spot. They always got their reasons. But, I think every manager is going to be a little bit in over their head when it's their first time in a big spot or a big series. But I thought Matt Quatraro has handled it well all season long. There's a very distinct reason why this team is where they're at. You got an MVP player, you got a great rotation, but a lot of credit, goes to Matt Quatraro for how he's managed his team. And I know the players love him. So I think he's the steady guy they need in that clubhouse. And I said it when they hired him that this could go down as the best hire in Royals history. And yes, that's with Ned Yost, but you talk about this turnaround, he's done it in 1 year. I mean, he lost 106 games. That was an evaluation year. And now this is one of the best run differential teams in all of baseball. So I really don't have too many complaints for Matt Quatraro at this point in the season. Okay, looks like that's our final round of questions Actually, we do have two more here. I'll get to them real quickly before we get to break. Steve asked, wondering if maybe on an off day for the Royals, if you'd be interested in a segment or a show of behind-the-scenes look of what it's like to be a Royal, or some stories throughout the years that give you more insight on what it's like to be a major leaguer. Hopefully, you get the gist of my question. Really have enjoyed your stuff since the offseason. Keep doing great work. Been YouTubing you from Puerto Rico. We'll love to hear that, Steven, and thank you for the kind words. This offseason, I will tell you this, that we are definitely going to put more of an emphasis on interviews and getting some players and maybe getting some coaches to have a segment or two. That will definitely be coming in the offseason, unless there's some breaking news that we're going to go over. But to me, I do think that that is going to be a point of emphasis going forward. So fortunately, couldn't get one done on the off day. And right now, it's just kind of a busy schedule and getting some interviews done with the guys being in season. But this offseason, definitely be looking forward to that. And the last one from YouTube comes from Joshua. Do we need to figure out a long-term center fielder? And if so, how do we go about that? Any names come to mind? I do think there's some outfield depth that is problematic in the minor league system for the Royals. There are guys that I think will have a chance. They'll get a shot, but not this year. And I don't think they have that future center fielder right now. Kyle Isbell has been a very good placeholder for the center field position, and he's having a career year this year. But I think that the next center fielder of the future just isn't in this organization right now. Hopefully they can develop somebody, or they can use a first-round pick on an outfielder next year. But right now, I don't envision any future center fielder in the organization. I think Kyle Isbell will be at the rest of this year, and then probably next year at that. Okay, we're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, still a lot of questions to get into in this edition of Mailbag Friday. So that's coming up on Locked On Royals. You are tuning to Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. You can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. We got two sponsors that we want to give a shout out to, starting with SupplyHouse. Get supplies from the site that's made for the skilled trades at SupplyHouse.com. SupplyHouse.com is a reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Shop a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands and get your order delivered right to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Get expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business and talk to a real person every time. Pros in the skilled trades can get a competitive edge by joining SupplyHouse.com's free Trade Master program. Every Trade Master gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at SupplyHouse.com and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks at SupplyHouse.com. Also want to show some love to Liquid IV. It's going to be very hot in Kansas City. Some people have been listening from Puerto Rico, as you saw in that first segment of a Mailbag Friday. So if you're somewhere where it's tropical or it's hot, you're going on vacation or just in the day-to-day and you want to stay hydrated, be sure to go get some Liquid IVs for your bottled water. Maybe you drink out of a Stanley. I know I do. I got tons of bottled waters around here, a lot of empty bottled waters, because I'm drinking a lot of Liquid IVs. I think they're tasty. They keep me very hydrated. I used to deal with headaches from dehydration, and now I don't at all because I just put one packet in there. I think it's really tasty, and again, it's refreshing, and I feel good after I drink a Liquid IV. So there are no more thirsty summers when you indulge in hydration with Liquid IV. Get 20% off your first order of Liquid IV when you go to liquidiv.com and use code MLB at checkout. That's 20% off your first order when you shop Better Hydration today using promo code MLB at liquidiv.com. Well, we got a lot of questions to get into from Twitter, and I want to make sure I get to at least 90% of these, but that might be a stretch at this point. Because, we got well over 30 to get into, and we had a lot from YouTube. So I apologize if I don't get to your question. And as always, if you like this format, the way we do it, I don't read the questions beforehand. So it gives the real authentic answer when we do this. I don't really have time to prep an answer for you. So Royals Report asks, what's the trust level in Adam Frazier? Adam Frazier's a bench bat. I think he can hit righties pretty well. He's a late game defensive replacement at times. He can lead off in a handful of games. I'm not saying he's a game breaker. He's a game changer. But to me, he's fine as a bench bat. And I don't think he's going anywhere anytime soon. And he's actually been hot, over his last 15 or 16 games or so. And he's in the lineup tonight. Maybe he can do some damage off Taijuan Walker. Rusty asks, we extending Singer yet or no? I don't see the Royals giving Brady Singer an extension. I mean, in the past, I think that's something Dayton Moore would do to kind of honor a guy after a first full season at the big league level in which he succeeded from start to finish. I'm not going to rule it out, but I just think there's other guys they would want to give an extension to. And maybe you look at Brady Singer's numbers, his overall numbers, the underlying data, and go, I think we can find somebody else, or maybe you have somebody you have higher hopes for in the minor league system to replace him when his time here is done in Kansas City. So right now I'm going to say no. I don't think that there's going to be an extension for Brady Singer. Mahomes to Kelsey asks, will Alec Marsh be up anytime soon? Yeah, I think either for the doubleheader game on Monday, he might start one of those. But if not, I think it'll be the following week when September call-ups happen. Casey Sports Connoisseur asked, if the Royals end up with a wild card, what would be your ideal bracket who we play in the wild card? I have voiced this before. I don't think there's anybody I'm truly scared of because the Royals getting into the postseason is already, checking a box off the list here. I think that you would want to draw somebody like, a Baltimore. I didn't want to say Baltimore because Baltimore can get hot at any point. I think my point is I want to draw somebody that's got a lot of pressure on them. And when we had our Red Sox crossover, I think the teams that have the most pressure on them going into the postseason would be Minnesota, would be Cleveland, or excuse me, not Cleveland, would be Minnesota, would be the Yankees and Baltimore. Those are the three teams that have immense pressure. The Guardians won't have that much pressure. Maybe you could say so because of their drought for a World Series, but they're so incredibly young and have overachieved this year like the Royals have. And I don't think the Astros have any pressure. They have come back from the dead. They've already won a lot of championships. So they're going to be one of those teams I don't think you'd want to draw, but where things stand today, that's where the Royals would be heading. So I would like to see the Yankees or Baltimore because those are the teams that have all the pressure in the world, and you would hope that maybe they would be a little bit tight. You may disagree with me. You may want Houston. I could see that matchup because the Royals are 3-0 against them this year and were good against them last year. Maybe they have their numbers, so I could absolutely see that side as well. Next question we got here comes from Lee. Am I getting my hopes up with Zach being spotted at the game and he might come back as bullpen depth? No, I think him being at the game showed that his career is basically done at this point. I think that he's just trying to take in some baseball at this point. I do not think he is going to join this team in the middle of a playoff push, even though he would absolutely be embraced by the fan base. Lane asked, what do you think they need to go record-wise in the next 20? I think at worst case, they go 9-11. They go 9-11. That's 2 games under 500, and that would put them 13 games over 500 with just 20 or so games to go. Less than that, I think 15 games to go at that point in time. So to me, I think 9-11 worst case. I think you try to gun for 12-8 or 13-7 because of how good these teams are. This question comes from Chief Fly Royal. Any updates on Velasquez? Is it possible he returns to the roster, or will he likely ride it out in Omaha? I could see a world in which he takes Nick Lofton's spot in the September call-ups, but Nick Lofton's been much better down in Omaha, and he also plays more positions than Nelson Velasquez. So I would imagine that he rides it out in Omaha for the rest of the year. This one comes from Joe. Do you see the Royals continuing to use Adam Frazier and Garrett Hampson as 3 or 4 games a week players? No, I think the closer we get toward the end of the season, they might be 1 or 2 games a week type of players. And I think Garrett Hampson's already been that guy. If not, he doesn't play at all in the week. Adam Frazier might be closer to 2 to 3 games a week just based off matchups. Greg asked, everyone seems to think the Royals are bringing Marsh back August 1st. I'm sure you mean September 1st. But why would they wait considering bullpen struggles? Or are they bringing him up for the doubleheader against Cleveland? He threw his high in Omaha of 78 pitches in his last game, then bringing him back on September 1st. I do think that signs point to him starting one of those doubleheader games, so that would be my best guess. But if not, I think they'll just wait an extra week, and then they'll make a roster decision there with Alec Marsh coming up for the September call-ups. Shane asked any word on Hunter Harvey and when he may rejoin the team. I think that it just comes down to if that back is still flaring up. I think Matt Quatraro said today, or maybe it was a couple days ago, that he would be throwing today or try to resume throwing. And if all things go well, you might have a rehab outing or two. And then, yeah, I would expect maybe a return at the beginning part of September, maybe in that first week of September. And Jason asked, if you had to predict exactly who the Royals will call up in September, who are they calling up? I'm going to go with Alec Marsh, and I'm going to go with Nick Lofton. We're going to take our final break of the show, but before we do that, thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen today. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On MLB podcast as host Pat Sullivan, a.k.a. Sully's, here daily to provide national expertise with his trademark humor to help you get ready for the MLB playoffs here in the dog days of summer. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it all covered every single day on Locked On MLB, available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. When we come back, we will wrap it up with the remaining questions we have in our mailbag. That's next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Our last sponsor we want to give a shout out to is one of our newest sponsors in TonaI. For those who thrive on getting stuff done, including workouts, every minute counts. That's why you need TonaI, the smart strength training system that takes the guesswork out of working out so you can make sure you're making the most out of every rep. Even the most dedicated gym goers struggle with consistency. The commute, waiting for weights, other people's sweat, it makes skipping a workout very tempting. With TonaI, you can choose from thousands of workouts and train in the way you actually enjoy in the comfort of your own home. Unlike traditional gym equipment, TonaI uses adaptive digital weight to advance your training techniques. From professional athletes to the mom of three, TonaI is trusted by thousands who have become their strongest. Right now, TonaI is offering our listeners $200 off your TonaI purchase with promo code LOCKEDONMLB. That's TonaI.com and use promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $200 off your purchase. That's TonaI.com, promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $200 off. Want to get into these last round of questions. This one comes from MIZ123fan16. What are our chances for taking 2 of 3 from Philly? I mean, they've got the pitching matchups in a few of them. I mean, they're going to have one tonight with Michael Wacha and Taijuan Walker, and then Seth Lugo on Sunday against either a spot starter or a bullpen arm. So I would put it at, 45 to 50%. It's kind of a toss-up to me, depending on what the offense looks like. But I don't think that, Philly, with the way they've looked in the second half and who they're going to be throwing out there, that they should be expected to take 2 of 3 from Kansas City or sweep the Royals or something like that. I think the Royals have a good shot there. Shannon's Harp asks if you could pick one player to have a sensational career, highlight type run throughout the gauntlet, who would it be? Assuming all their players normal, meaning Bobby is still Bobby. I would love to see somebody like Michael Massey really pop off here in the gauntlet. I would love to see somebody like MJ Melendez do it just because we know how good Bobby, Vinny, and Salvia has been. I would love to see that fourth or that fifth guy to really have strong contributions in the gauntlet. So I'll say Massey or Melendez would be 2 guys I would love to see have a great 20-game stretch here. Missouri asked, what's your record prediction? I'm going to go 9-11. I think that they're going to be able to tread water enough, but they're also going to go through some struggles with some tough matchups when they have to go to the Bronx and take on the Yankees. They got to take on Cleveland for 4 games. Minnesota again. It's just going to be a tough schedule, but I still think 9-11 is fine at the end of this run, as long as Boston doesn't play 4 or 5 games over 500 in their next 20 games or so. KC Preds fan asked, within these next 20 games, what would you say the minimum amount of games they have to win to still be in good position? Yeah, I think 8 might be able to do the minimum. I would say 8 games if Boston plays 500 ball or Boston plays a few games under 500. They would be sweating it out toward the very end, but that to me is the minimum, is 8 wins. I'm not sure you can go much lower than that and expect to be holding on to your playoff spot. Waka Season asked, how would you feel about a possible postseason matchup against the Astros? 3-0 against them already this year, and it feels like we have their number for some reason. I would usually say yes, and that kind of factored into one of my answers in this episode. The Astros have no pressure, and playing at Minute Maid Park would be tough because of the dimensions, and that just feels like a team that's built to win there. They always win in the postseason, whether they're expected to or not. They turn on a different gear in October, whereas somebody like Cleveland or the Yankees or Baltimore, they struggle in the postseason. They've got more pressure on them. So I think it'd be fine in terms of who you're going up against, but you got to face Jose Altuve and Yordan Alvarez and Alex Bregman. They've got some good arms in the rotation that are getting hot at the right time. You never really want to face Houston in the postseason, but in terms of talent, I think the Royals could match up well, and you are right. They have had their number over the last 2 years. Bobbert Witt asks, who is the most important coach aside from Q, Jose Aguasil, Brian Sweeney, Vance Wilson? I love what Jose Aguasil has done with the infield and the defense and all that, and Vance Wilson has been better than even I thought he would be at the beginning of the year. But Brian Sweeney's the runaway here. To do what he's done with this pitching staff and to revamp a few of these guys, him and Zach Bove have just been phenomenal what they've done, and they can absolutely deserve a big piece of the pie in this turnaround, because this turnaround shouldn't have taken just 1 year. I know it's kind of rebuild 2.0 because the first one failed, but rebuild 2.0 should have taken longer than just 1 year, especially with where they were as a team, as an organization in 2023. Brett asked, which series coming up during the gauntlet has you most concerned and the least concerned? This series against Cleveland, even though Cleveland struggled, has me concerned because that could bury you in the Central. If you don't play well, that really feels like it could be an issue. That just feels like one of those things where Cleveland has their number at Progressive Field. So that series does concern me, even though Cleveland has struggled. Bob Witt Enjoyer asked, outside of Bobby, Vinny, and Salvi, who is going to need to come through the most in the Royals lineup during the gauntlet? How about Hunter Renfroe? I think Hunter Renfroe needs to get back to where he was just a few weeks ago, because he went on an ice-cold slump, and you could tell it hurt the offense when he started slumping a little bit. So I'm going to put that tab on Hunter Renfroe. I think you need him back to maybe even 80% of what he was giving you from the middle part of May till about the end of July. Brody asked, complicated question, but how many games do we need to win out of the next 20 to make the playoffs, be the top wild card, win the division, and have the best record in the MLB? This all, of course, is a best prediction. I'm going to say to make the playoffs, you got to go 13-7. I think going 6 games over 500 would put you firmly in the postseason at that point. Hell, you could be winning the division at that point, depending what Minnesota and Cleveland do. For the top wild card spot, I'll say 14-6 to win the division. I'll go one more. I'll say 15-5, and then have the best record in the MLB. I think we're talking 16-4, 17-3, just because I think some of those other teams that are ahead of the Royals, they're going to keep winning as well. So might be a little bit dramatic, but the focus to me is just play 500 ball or slightly above that. LaDonna asks, what pitching arms are likely to be called up during September? I'm going to go with Alec Marsh here. I don't think anybody else is going to get a chance unless injuries were to happen. And at that point, I could see Daniel Lynch or maybe somebody like Evan Sisk getting the call up to help out of the bullpen. Matt asked, in a year where the big league club is doing so well, there hasn't been a lot of attention paid to the prospects. So I just like to put my question slot up to tell everyone to go look at what Spencer Nivens has done this month. Man has gone off. Absolutely. Spencer Nivens is on a tear right now. I loved him coming out of the draft last year, and he's channeling that power, and that power is noticeable right now. I believe he has homered in 7 straight games. He's got 11 home runs in the month of August. Just an incredible hot stretch there for Spencer Nivens, and he's one of my favorite hitting prospects down in the Royals organization right now. But good point there from Matt. And lastly, Nathan asks, in your opinion, what is the number of wins we'll need to feel confident about a playoff spot? Is it 88? I do think it's 88. I think 88 is going to get you the final spot in the wild card. 90 would be, I'm locking it in. There's no way you're missing the postseason at 90 wins. But I do think 88 wins is good enough for this team to make the postseason. Well, thank you to all that sent in the questions. We got to every single one that I can find here, unless my phone had some issues there and I missed out on some. But thank you to all the questions. Every single week we do this. If you're a new listener, send them to my Twitter account at JohnnyJ_15 or leave it on some of our YouTube videos below. But that is going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I have been your host, Jack Johnson. Before we say goodbye for the week and we can enjoy this Phillies series, thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen today. Now go check out the Locked On MLB podcast. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it all covered every single day. You can find the link to Locked On MLB in the description, so you don't need to search it. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'll have a full breakdown of the Phillies series and look ahead to that series against Cleveland on Monday. Actually might recap with an afternoon episode on Monday, because you'll have game 1, I think, at noon, and then it'll be an evening game in Cleveland for the second part of the doubleheader. So probably an afternoon episode on Monday. We'll have a little bit of a recap of the Phillies series and that Cleveland series. But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.